So I guess I have to ask, is it really you? Why did you send Meryl Streep in your place to accept your Oscar?
My Oscar? Oh, no, the BAFTA.
The BAFTA.
I didn't really, I couldn't be here. I don't remember why I couldn't be here. So, and she was going to be here, so I wrote a speech in case I won, and she agreed to read it. So that was sort of.
It wasn't a kind of a reluctance to be at the event and to be.
No, I was there twice. I was there 2 other times, so I showed up. No, I just for some reason couldn't make it that year.
Okay. So I'll just briefly explain how we're going to do this. I was going to rather unimaginatively go through Charlie Kaufman's work in chronological order. But just before we get into that, I guess I wanted to ask you a little bit about your background in television. And of course, there'll be scope for asking questions when we've rattled through this. Hopefully, I won't be talking for very long. In television, you served kind of an apprenticeship, for want of a better word, as a television writer. You worked on 2 episodes of Chris Elliott's Get a Life.
No, I worked on a lot of episodes. I wrote 2 episodes.
You wrote 2 episodes,
yeah.
Okay. And you worked on a couple of other shows, Ned and Stacey and the Dana Carvey Show. Was that at all useful to you as a screenwriter?
It was useful to me to have a job. I mean, seriously, I mean, it was the first time I was hired to write, and that's a big deal, and before that I had a lot of difficulty showing people the stuff I'd written, and you really can't have that problem if you're working on a TV show. You have to turn in your scripts, and so I had to get over a lot of things. I had to, I was very shy in the room. There's a writer's room in sitcoms where you're, throwing out jokes, and it's a very competitive environment, and I was very shy, barely audible for the first several months of working there. So that was good. And I was being paid to be a writer, and that was really good. But I don't know, useful, that's very useful. I don't know if it was like it wasn't really a training thing. It was a job.
And was there a kind of pivotal moment when you decided this isn't enough, I want to do something bigger, and or had you always wanted to?
I always wanted to, and I had an impossible time figuring out how to get into that business that I wanted to get into, and I was 30 when I decided, okay, I'll try to work in TV. It wasn't something I really wanted to do. It was with an eye toward maybe getting people to know me and having a chance to write screenplays. So that was the pivotal moment, deciding this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to get a job on a TV show, and I was very sort of focused and pragmatic and tenacious in a way that I hadn't been, because it was kind of like a last-ditch effort for me. At the time I was answering phones in an art museum in Minneapolis, and I was making like $6 an hour, which was good for me, and it was good for me, and that was it. I borrowed money. I borrowed $3,000, and I went out to LA and tried to get a job, and if I didn't get a job, I wasn't going to be able to pay that money back. It was, and then I got lucky. So.
I mean, one thing I get from your films is this kind of deep acquaintance, this familiarity with the craft of screenwriting, and even though they're spellbindingly original, nevertheless there does seem to be an underpinning of craft. And I guess I may be completely mistaken in that.
No, it's just funny because last night at the screening, some guy asked me. It was like the craziest question. It was like, I noticed that your screenplays don't have any structure. Do you feel okay about your screenplays not having structure, or do you wish that your screenplays had structure? So apparently there's someone, maybe he's out here tonight, I hope, who disagrees with you. Yes, I think I have a craft.
I guess how do you know which rules to stick to and which rules to break?
I don't think there are any rules. So, there's experience and there's trying to figure out a creative way to tell a story. Those are the two things I think that I'm interested in, and that maybe I have at this point, some of. So, but there aren't any rules.
Well, let me put it a different way. I mean, which aspects of the craft do you think it's important to preserve, and which parts of it are dispensable?
I think that I don't really. I think that I have. I think that I've got some maybe skill or something like that, but I don't think of it as that there are rules that I'm either adhering to or throwing away. I really do try to think of it as this is a piece of work. I have these different tools to work with. I have the ability to create fictional people. I have the ability to describe scenery. I've got the ability to put it in a certain order. I've got the ability to write lines for these people, and then I figure out the best way to do that, to my mind. But I don't think about. I kind of vaguely know what a 3-act structure is, but it doesn't interest me.
Right.
It doesn't interest me. It seems like an odd thing. It seems like it's like saying that there's one way to paint a painting. No one says that, but they do say that there's one way to write a screenplay, and so I disagree.
I guess the whole trajectory of the questions I've been asking you is trying to kind of fit you into a story template that I've got in my head, which is, you start out as this bright television writer who learns the craft in the kind of trenches of the television industry and then uses that, which is clearly rubbish. But do you often find yourself resisting efforts to impose these kind of journalistic story templates on your career?
I resist it if it's not true. I get that not only on my career, I get it on personal things too. Journalists are always trying to sort of figure out an angle. I did this this interview for Time magazine several years ago, and it's one of those things which I think I'm more aware of now. But there's this kind of thing that journalists do where they befriend you and they make you think that they like you, and then you trust them, and then they kill you, and so anyway, so I had this conversation with this woman, and at some point in the conversation, we're talking about my past, and I said that I got picked on in school, and so the article comes out, and the headline is "Revenge of the Nerd," and her whole angle was, look at me now. You beat me up when I was in high school, but now I'm getting back at all of you, and I was so at the time. Now I don't care, but at the time I was really offended because it has nothing to do with why I do anything. And it was just this thing that she, wanted to say because it gave the article a form. And I have a difficult time doing that to people I make up, characters I make up, that people feel comfortable doing that to real people who live in the world is an odd thing. So I guess, I don't, like I said, I'd been writing for a long time when I got a job in TV. My first job, I started trying to get that job when I was 30. By the time I got my first TV job, I was 32 years old. I wasn't a kid. And I think in a lot of ways that probably ended up being helpful for me, because I was not taken by it, in the same way that I saw from people I worked with who were younger than I was, but I don't think that I think that I had my comedic ideas or my interests or, the style that I was maybe interested in working in pre-existed my TV work. And it was, the TV work was good. I mean, I got the confidence, I think, from doing it. I worked with a lot of really funny people, and, you know, and that's always good. I mean, it's inspiring, and you do get an education from doing that. You hear other people's jokes, you know. So, you know.
Why a real person and not an actor in the John Malkovich role? I mean, why not have? Why introduce that element of reality into a work of fiction? What was going on there?
I mean, I think it's funnier, you know. It's funnier, and it's more sort of confusing in a good way. You know, it's sort of it raises the stakes. You know, if it's an actor playing it, then it doesn't raise the same questions as are raised by John Malkovich playing himself in this particular version of his life. You know.
And did you work with him on his dialogue so it would sound like him, or did you just give him his lines and he was like, "This is me"? No,
I mean, I think that, you know, Spike and I didn't know John when I wrote this, and Spike and I decided before we met him that this is the John Malkovich that we're representing, the character in this movie, and that we weren't going to try to change it to be like the Malkovich that we would meet if there was any difference. And we stuck to that. And no, we didn't need to change any lines.
And he at no stage said, "I just wouldn't say that."
No, he didn't say that. But there's a story that Spike tells that at one point he did tell John that John wouldn't say this that way. You know, based on our idea of John Malkovich, and then John changed his reading.
Right. And why John Malkovich? Why not another real actor?
Well, you know, at the time when I wrote it, it was because it's as simple as that I thought it was funny, you know, and since I've been asked this question a lot, I've kind of analyzed why it's funny to me, and I think it's funny because it's a funny idea that people would want to be him, but it's not, but he's a serious actor. It's not a joke. Mm-hmm. It's not a jokey choice. He's a real serious actor, but it's funny. And I think also there's a kind of a quality that to Malkovich that's sort of unknowable and odd. And I think you can imagine that there's somebody looking out through his eyes at all times that isn't him. And plus his name. There's no other name that works.
One of the things that seems to distinguish your work is a sort of impatience with artifice. So rather than have an actor play an actor, you just have John Malkovich seemingly playing himself, and that seems to be symptomatic of a kind of what is new and why your work is a departure, and that's obviously much more of a theme in adaptation. But at the same time as this kind of intolerance, if you like, of the lies we're normally told in the course of watching films and being required to suspend disbelief and so forth, you also seem completely enchanted by these artificial, fantastic kind of worlds which require special effects to create, as we just saw. I mean, is that a paradox, or am I reading too much into that?
I mean, I really like artifice, and I really like reminding people that they're watching a movie. And I really like the idea of having people question the veracity of what they're watching. And and so by mixing things that are possibly real with things that are clearly not real or are questionable, I think to me it's interesting and it's fun. And I don't see it as a paradox, I guess. I mean, I've always liked the fake world, and I like sets, and I like, illusion and all that stuff. But I don't like being lied to, and I think in a way I think that movies lie a lot, and maybe I'm trying not to lie in some of these things by saying that I am lying, then I'm not lying anymore. If that makes sense.
Another thing which recurs frequently in your work is, and which you've talked about in other interviews, is the idea that as human beings, we're in some sense trapped in our own subjectivity. We can't in any sense transcend our own point of view, and your films always very much kind of depict events from the point of view of usually the protagonist. But in Being John Malkovich, was this a kind of fantasy about how we might escape this kind of solipsistic world? We could actually climb into someone else's brain and experience things.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to feeling that way, and one is that it's a recognition that that's just the truth, that we're, each of us is an organism, and we have, sense organs, and we perceive the world through them, and it's not the world as it is that we're perceiving, it's the world as it's translated by this mound of material in our heads. And, I think that I've often wanted to be someone other than I am. That's a common feeling that I have. And I think that was the kind of and maybe because I'm so aware that I am me and that I'm limited by being me. And I'm limited by people's perception of me. How I am in the world is how I'm treated, or you know what I mean? And so I think that initially the idea of finding a portal into someone's brain was kind of an idea that appealed to me, and then I made a joke of it, which maybe is somewhat defensive, but it's probably where it came from. My impetus was, okay, I've got this screenwriter who is working on a script, and he has no friends and no social life, and there's nothing dramatic about that. I didn't know how to show it, so I thought, okay, it's really, that stupid identical twin idea that people always do in movies, I thought was really funny. So I thought, okay, I'll give him someone to talk to, and it'll be him. And then once I did that, I thought, okay, his brother's a dope, because it's fun to write dopes, And then I thought, oh, what if what if he, wants to do what Charlie? It just sort of like progressed, and then I came to a point where the screenplay, it sort of like started to write itself, and the screenplay then becomes the subject of the screenplay, and the transformation of the screenplay into this questionable thing became part of the collaboration that Charlie eventually did with his brother, and it just fell in place, and it was fun. And I went from being stuck, really unable to write for months, to being really excited about it.
Like the character, like Charlie Kaufman in the film. You actually had writers.
No, because he doesn't become excited about it. He
gets blocked at one stage. What I mean.
He takes his brother in, and allows his brother to finish the screenplay, basically. So Charlie in the movie has failed, and the screenplay fails, and so the movie fails, which I felt the movie needed to actually really fail in order for that to work, rather than winking at the audience and saying, okay, we're failing.
Were you disappointed when it didn't?
No, I did. It did fail. It did fail. It didn't win. It became this thing that didn't resolve itself in the same form or at the same level that it started, and that was intentional. It went into this other world. Everything that he said he didn't want to do obviously happened. All of these cliches happened, but they happened really. I mean, we really, Spike and I really tried to do them. We tried to make the relationship with Amelia feel like, like a lovely movie thing, and all that stuff. So it's almost like, when the movie's over, you're kind of pleased, but you're kind of like, I don't know. I mean, the goal was to sort of have this sort of like ambivalence at the end.
Did working with a big box office star present any difficulties for you? I mean, did he try and change anything?
No. I think he was great. I think he came to this, and I think it's always been the case with the people who worked on these movies. Jim came to it because he wanted to do this movie, and he had met with Michelle before, and was like Michelle, and actually, the first time I met him was the first rehearsal, and he came in, and he was wearing a hat very similar to that, and he needed a shave. And I just had a real sigh of relief when I saw him, because I just pictured this very rubber-faced, hair thing guy, and he looked like a person. He looked really cool, and Michelle and I, after the thing, said, okay, Jim wears no makeup, and he always needs a shave in this movie, and he agreed to that, and I think it does a lot to humanize him, and I think he was available throughout the production to try to do the part rather than to try to be Jim Carrey.
Do you find it easy to preserve some element of control in the filmmaking process, given the level at which you're working? I mean, a lot of writers, are reluctant, wary of doing films, with Hollywood production entities and with big stars, because they feel like they will lose control.
But what's the alternative? I mean, that's who you have to do them with. When Spike Jonze said he wanted to do Being John Malkovich, I had no idea who he was, and I didn't care. It was like someone wanted to make my movie, and it turned out to be a good thing, and it turned out to be like a really fruitful collaboration for both of us, I think. But you're trying to get your career going, and then I had this person who I trusted, and I made another movie with him, and then I had a relationship with Michelle Gondry, which was also collaborative, and we did 2 movies together, and I think that's what you need to find. You need to find people who are allies, who you trust, and I think I've had pretty good luck, and I think it's the same with the actors. As I said, they've all come, I think, with the right spirit.
Was your experience on Confessions of a Dangerous Mind a less happy one?
Well, it wasn't really an experience because I wasn't really involved in that. I don't think that George Clooney was all that interested in what I was interested in, and so I was kind of separate from that production, and that was frustrating for me because I care about these things. They're important to me. These scripts are important to me, and I had this sort of good experience of working with directors. So this was kind of an unusual thing for me, although I know it's a typical thing for writers in Hollywood.
One of the things I got from the film was it felt like a kind of final summation of many of the things that you've been exploring.
I hope not.
Well, it almost felt like a kind of last testament. It was like, if I die tomorrow, at least I will have said what I felt I was put on this earth to say. It had a kind of finality about it. Is that... I mean, I think you quoted in another interview a writer saying something which had really struck a chord with you, which is you should try and put everything you know in everything you do, and it certainly felt like that.
Yeah, and everything you write, but I've tried to do that with everything. I just know other things now, I mean, I'm going through life, I'm a different person, even in the process of writing this, and making it, I've changed, and and I'm trying to get closer to something. I don't think I've arrived at anything. I don't think you ever can. And I think that's kind of one of the things that is expressed in this movie. You can't ever finish anything, really, because if you're trying to be inclusive of as much as you can of the truth of your existence, then you just keep learning more, and so, it's like the thing you were asking me about earlier. If you have this sort of confusion about your feelings about somebody else, that too is part of your reality, and you add that, and you're not trying to direct it. I'm not trying to direct it towards a conclusion or a grand statement. I would never do that. I have no interest in that. I don't feel like I have the authority to do that. I'm just trying to express as full a feeling of a life experience as I can, and that can always, it's always going to be able to get more,
I mean, it sounds a little like the predicament that the Philip Seymour Hoffman character is in the film. I mean, he's engaged in this search for authenticity in a universe in which that isn't really available to him. I mean, it's as though he's constantly groping for it, but just missing, because he doesn't quite know exactly what it might consist of. Nothing seems to have that property.
He's very literal, and his idea is that if he could just put everything that's in the real world into this play, which he can do because it's a movie, and you can do things like that in a movie, then, you know, I mean, I guess people, I don't know if it's clear at all from the trailer if people haven't seen it, but he ends up constructing a full-size replica of New York City in a warehouse in New York, and populating it with thousands of actors who live there as performers in this fake reality. So he's trying to, down to the last detail of this place where he lives, he's trying to express it, and his way of doing it is in this very literal way, whereas his wife, who's a painter, does almost exactly the opposite, and her canvases are getting smaller and smaller throughout the movie until you can't see them without special glasses. And so there's the question of how does one express, I guess, something. But yeah, I don't think he's getting there. But he's trying to approximate things, which I actually like. I like the idea of a big fake New York. I mean, that appeals to me too. I would do it if I could.
Yeah, initially I took it to be just a metaphor for building a film set, which is supposed to be New York in New York. But actually, it's not exactly that, is it? It's if the technology was available for you to actually recreate New York in a large enough warehouse, you'd probably do it, right?
Well, but the thing is, I mean, where this movie kind of moves away from what is possible is that this warehouse exists within New York City. And yet inside of it is big enough to build an entire full-size replica of New York. And in fact, because it's a complete full-size replica of New York, there is a replica of the warehouse in this replica, in which there is another full-size replica of New York. And this goes on and on. How far, we don't know, but we do see several versions of it.
Right.
So yes, if I could do that, I would. It's kind of a dream. There's a dream kind of logic to the movie. So there's things that can't really happen that happen, which is fun for me.
I hope you'll join me in thanking Mr. Kaufman for spending so much of his time with us this evening. It's been a real privilege.